Tammy Poff here, Poff Studio. I've been trying for some time now to find an automatic online calculator for my rigid Heddle weavers where we can put in just a few simple numbers and get back the width and the length and the yardage needed to complete our projects. I just haven't found what I wanted. So I broke down and created my own, and you can use that for free on my website, www.poffstudio.com. Just click on Yarn Estimator. We're going to walk through the highlights of that worksheet here. I wanted a calculator that reflects the results that rigid Heddle weavers get. Online calculators I've used seem most appropriate for floor loom weavers. The tension and the techniques we use can make for very different results. Also, I wanted a worksheet that offered assistance to complete the boxes. Here's a full-page view of my yarn estimator for rigid Heddle weavers. The mobile and tablet-friendly versions may appear slightly different. The boxes are where you fill in your numbers, and the rest calculates for you. I call it an estimator because I want to stress that our numbers are an estimate. Too many variables affect exact results. But I'm still obsessed with finding an easy way to help us close in on the answers anyway. Yellow highlighted boxes are answers you'll use when you select your yarn and when you warp your loom, so they're important. Also important, some rigid Heddle weavers tie on to the front apron rod with double knots, and others use bows to secure half knots. This can make a noticeable difference in how much of the loom waist is preserved for fringe on that end, so we're going to assume in our numbers that you're tying bows, which normally allows you about 6 to 7 inches of fringe remaining. Also, sometimes we put 2 projects on one warp. If fringe is needed on both pieces, we need to allow for that in the middle. Longer fringe, or internal fringe, is taken care of in the green shaded box below. Now just tab down the page to fill in the blanks. If you're going to print and save this worksheet for future reference, it's a good idea to name your project, and you may want to add the date as well. You'll decide what you want the finished width to be. Then there's shrinkage. Rigid Heddle weavers work with a huge variety of yarns. Playing with all the different yarns in the yarn shop, that's the forte of our little loom. While I do recommend swatching when you're unsure of how your yarn's going to perform, I've given you some guidance here on draw-in and shrinkage because it's unlikely that we'll have woven and washed a swatch every time we run off to buy yarn. Now, floor loom weavers are likely to experience greater shrinkage off the loom due to the increased tension their looms provide. I've been documenting my results for years on the rigid Heddle, and I find that I consistently lose somewhere around 10 to 13% in the length and width of my woven rectangles. If the yarn is loosely plied like a soft wool or other animal fiber, I do lose as much as 15%. I can't think of a time when my work has contracted and shrunk by 20%, unless maybe I'm putting it in a hot dryer. Mohair hardly moves, so I allow about 3% for that loss. And viscous fibers like rayon or bamboo, I find they shrink around 10%, but they're likely to gain a little back in the wearing. The width of your warp will be what we call grossed up from the finished width. This makes the warp width the number that we subtract the percentage of shrinkage from to get your desired finished width. More simply, just know that this is a higher number and more accurate than taking 10%, for example, of the finished width and then just adding that on to determine how wide to warp. If you're using the tab key to go from box to box, the next entry will be PPI, or picks per inch. To predict your picks per inch, if you haven't worked with this fabric before, involves some guesswork based upon knowledge and experience. You're looking typically for a balance between ends per inch and picks per inch if you want drape for wearable fabric. So ideally, these would be the same number, so you had a balanced grid. But just saying you're going to beat your weft to a PPI that matches your EPI doesn't really work. Each yarn has a practical beat to create a happy medium for both a stable fabric and one that has great drape. I give this a detailed discussion in the free trial of Chapter 1 on both my online courses for weaving the V-cowl. You can reach this at the link provided, Weaving with POF Studio, if you'd like to know more. Note that your weft estimator won't do its calculating job until you continue onward to determine your total weaving length. Ends per inch, that's your reed dent. Then you're given the number of ends in case you're keeping track of end count. If you're direct warping, and this comes out to be an odd number, you can mentally round down one to get your even number. Your yardage will be a little over in this case. Next, how long do you want this piece to be? You'll enter the same percentage for take up and shrinkage as you did above for draw in and shrinkage, unless you've already worked with this fabric and you know that this number may be more or less than the previous entry. The number of pieces on one warp is a required field for accurate calculations. You'll have to enter one or more if that's applicable. Add inches in the next box if you want to sample your weft, and extra inches in the one after that for longer fringe, or if you have fringe in between pieces. I have an inch of space in between my 4 placemats, so I entered 3 inches here, as you can see. Now this middle section is where my obsession for detail is showing. We normally warp with front and back apron rods in a location on our smaller looms that sets these rods about 12 inches apart, like my Cricut loom here. Different brands and loom sizes can make for extra waste here because of the practical location of these rods may require an extra couple of inches, like my flip loom here. So check this on your loom if you need to add this to your estimates. As you can see, my placemats are going on my flip loom, so I've added 2 inches. You've completed the necessary answers that apply to your project, and now you have the results you were looking for. Lastly, you can reset to clear the input boxes and use the worksheet again, or print your estimate to retain your project. Thanks for joining me.